Let's go to our CNN chief Supreme Court analyst, Joan Biskupic, who is in the newsroom. What's happening, Joan?
Supreme Court just this minute, Brianna, announced it's going to take up a challenge to President Trump's order lifting birthright citizenship. You might remember on January 20th, his first day in office, he took his Sharpie pen and he said, this is a big one. And what he did was he tried to eliminate the automatic birthright citizenship that all Americans have had for more than a century. And what that does, it goes to the 14th Amendment of the Constitution that says all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States. That means that anyone who's born here, Brianna, automatically becomes a U.S. citizen. And what Donald Trump's executive order tried to do was say anyone who was born of someone who was not here lawfully or who was here on some sort of temporary status, that person's baby would not automatically be a citizen. It's a very it's probably of all the Trump actions that have been taken to date, Brianna, this one is the most challenging because what it does is it flies in the face of the 14th Amendment that was adopted in 1868, and it flies in the face of an 1898 Supreme Court precedent that said even if you were born of, in that case it happened to be a Chinese national, even if you were born of someone who was not here as a U.S. citizen, you definitely still have citizenship here in the U.S., Brianna. And the court has not set exactly what the timetable will be for hearing oral arguments, but I imagine they would be in the spring with a decision by the end of June.
Okay, so how would that play out? We would then just see the normal oral arguments. And I notice you're pointing at your ear, Joan. I think maybe you're having some
now
kind of
I can hear you. Now
okay, you can hear me now. All right, so
Yes,
how would that play out? We would just be able to hear oral arguments and really get a sense of where the justices are on this issue.
Exactly. Just as a kind of reminder of what's happened, the Supreme Court took up a kind of a mini chapter in this last spring when several lower court judges said that this was blatantly unconstitutional and issued nationwide orders. And the Supreme Court heard just a part of that dispute, saying they'd look only at lower court judges' authority to issue nationwide injunctions. They rejected that. They rejected the lower court's action, but they never got to the merits. So what we'll do is we will hear early in 2026. You'll be able to hear, everybody in our audience will be able to hear, because these arguments will be live streamed on the Supreme Court audio, and hear the Trump lawyers make their case for why Donald Trump should be able to roll back this automatic citizenship that has been with us, as I say, for more than a century. And the challengers are representing people who are here on temporary status and who have had children at immigrant advocacy groups. This could potentially affect hundreds of thousands of babies born in the U.S. every year, Brianna. So we'll hear those arguments. They'll both make each side of the case. And then, as I said, likely by the end of June. Now, I've really tried to convey what a major step this was of all the Trump executive orders that have taken place since January 20th. This one is probably the most audacious, and that is actually not a judgment that's too far-fetched, because even the Trump lawyers have talked about it as a novel and sensitive thing that he's doing here, because no one has ever tried to roll back something that's been in place since 1868 in the 14th Amendment. So I have to say, just at this point, having not even heard the arguments that will be presented to the court, they have a very steep mountain to climb if they think they're going to get even this conservative court to rule for them, Brianna.
Yeah, so true. And very interesting that they've decided to hear the arguments, because whatever they say is going to be very, very important. Joan, thank you so much.
Yes, and if I could just...
Yeah,
I just want to mention one thing, Brianna. Every lower court judge who has heard an early version of this case has ruled against the Trump administration.
Yeah, and we'll see if the court goes along the same route.
Look, I want to shift to something else pretty seismic that actually happened the past hour while all this spectacle was going on. And that is that the Supreme Court has agreed to decide the legality of Donald Trump's directive to restrict birthright citizenship. Just walk us through this. And I mean, this could essentially be one of the biggest legal decisions of Trump's presidency, right?
Yeah, it is interesting though, because I feel like we say this all the time, that this is one of the most important legal decisions of President Trump's tenure, and that's because so many of his decisions have ended up in the courts, and specifically at the Supreme Court. And of course, the big question here is going to be whether or not they once again appear to go along with some of these really boundary-pushing legal claims that the White House has made. And so far, the White House believes that they will. I mean, one of the things that when you talk to administration officials about all of these policies is that the hope is that they do land in the Supreme Court, because they do believe if these policies land in the Supreme Court will rule in their favor. One interesting thing about the Supreme Court taking this up is that this was a controversial issue that the Supreme Court really in the last year has shied away from taking cases on. They have tried to stay out of anything surrounding this. So it was interesting that they're actually deciding to hear this case. And of course, again, this is all about that executive order ending birthright citizenship.
Been fighting so long and so hard that they don't know what the they're doing.